The Iowa caucus obviously was a massive, perhaps historic failure, and we might not be out of it, despite the fact that we supposedly have almost all of the results. Supposedly, a recanvassing might actually happen. And joining us now to talk about the failures and what might come out of Iowa, we've got Washington Bureau Chief for The Intercept and TYT contributor Ryan Grim. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be here.
Great to have you here. So I know you've actually been traveling around. You've been on planes with the candidates. You've talked to supporters of the candidates. Before we dive into the specific errors, I want to get your impression as a person who has covered multiple elections about how bad Iowa actually was.
Well, it was about as bad as it can get. So Iowa, for people who haven't seen it up close, is kind of an unfolding, rolling disaster in the making every single time, just because of the way they do it. And it's kind of radical democracy, and it's beautiful. And radical democracy is a rolling disaster. If you ever went to an Occupy Wall Street General Assembly, when you get a lot of people in a room together making collective decisions, it gets messy. So the way that the caucuses work is that there's not a lot of security. At the one I was at, there were 3 dudes who came from Wisconsin to support Yang, and they just kind of blended in with the other Yang supporters. And at the end of the caucus, you had these Biden people and Bernie people and Warren people all like pleading and begging these Yang supporters to come join them, to get to goose up their numbers a little bit. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, guys, these dudes are from Wisconsin. Like they can't even vote. And they probably, if they tried hard enough, they easily could end up being counted in the tabulation. I put up a video earlier of these 69 Sanders supporters being counted, and they just kind of go in a conga line, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they were like, well, we thought we had 71, but 69 is still enough to crush everybody here. So let's settle on 69. So then the precinct chair will say, are there any objections to the number 69? And the other campaigns are like, it's fine with us. And the Sanders people say it's fine with us. Then they wound up with 76 in the second ballot. But in other words, they're not even sure that they have the accurate number. They're just kind of agreeing to agree on this number. So every individual caucus is kind of a mess.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they throw an app. And I think, the app company deserves, plenty of blame for the way that this went down. There was a bug in their app, and it wasn't designed in a way that was easy for precinct chairs to use. The real fault to me is with the state party that thought that an app was a good idea. Mm-hmm. There's just this impulse among people to technologize everything. When you could have just used off-the-shelf technologies like texting or phone calls, or Google spreadsheet.
That's how I feel about Slack.
Right.
We don't need it, basically. Right. Well, I want to add one thing to what you're saying. So obviously, there's the inherent nature of caucuses that there's some ambiguity and things like that. We also have all this reporting about data errors. So there's a New York Times analysis, more than 100 precincts reported results that were internally inconsistent. There was missing data or that were not possible under the complex rules of the Iowa caucuses. In some cases, vote tallies don't add up. In others, precincts are shown allotting the wrong number of delegates to certain candidates. In at least a few cases, the Iowa Democratic Party's reported results do not match those reported by the precincts. Now we know Tom Perez is saying that there might be a recanvass in Iowa. Right. What should be done considering the things you were talking about now, these data errors that are cropping up?
Well, so on the one hand, they clearly do need to triple check everything. Like not just the Times, but all across Twitter, people were pointing out identifiable errors, just saying like, look, this clearly is wrong. This doesn't make sense. And so, if you can find more than 100 identifiable errors, then that there's a lot more errors than that weren't immediately identifiable. This is a caucus that happened in public. People voted with their hands raised in front of other people. It's probably the most video recorded voting, statewide voting that they've ever done. There's going to be photos, evidence, paper trails from everywhere. Now, one problem they're going to have is with this is the first year they did these paper ballots where they had people fill out. A lot of people just left with them because they weren't used. They didn't understand what they were. Like They raised their hand. So if they try to connect things to these paper ballots, that's going to be a problem for them. But they definitely need to at least compare what they put up in their spreadsheet to the numbers that were written down in the precincts, and they took pictures of them or whatever at the time. On the other hand, for Tom Perez to tweet that out just as Bernie Sanders is like taking the lead in Iowa shows either outright hostility towards Sanders or just a complete and utter lack of self-awareness, or maybe some conscious and subconscious combination of the two. But it's just absurd, and how the errors just were continuously going against Bernie Sanders rather than, if it's totally random, you'd expect some errors to work in his favor and some errors to work against him. And at times, the Times said it did find some errors that did go against him, which is at least comforting. But the public high-profile errors were all going against him. And for Tom Perez to just come out and as soon as Sanders takes the lead to say that just doesn't show that he has his finger on the pulse of how half of the Democratic primary or electorate or more is just losing complete faith in the party to run a fair process.
And most of those people have long lost faith in Tom Perez individually. Thanks for watching The Damage Report. What if you could protect yourself on the internet for the price of a cup of coffee a month? Well, if you head to nordvpn.com/TYT, you'll be able to connect up to 6 devices to NordVPN's military-grade encryption for $349 a month. If you go now, they'll even throw in a month for free. Go now.